It's social distancing at the Arizona Chamber, a segment we also call Happy Hour with Hammer. My name is Garrick Taylor. We're, as always, joined by the CEO of the Arizona Chamber, Glenn Hammer. Glenn, another guest. The stars are out. Why don't you introduce our special guest?
Very, very special guest. On tonight's episode, we have the chief, I'm sorry, I knew I would screw it up. It should be chief. In fact, I'm going to just say we've amended it. We have this power at the Arizona Chamber, but the presiding judge, civil judge at Maricopa County, Judge Pam Gates, who's just been was a great attorney for a number of years, partner of one of the elite law firms before becoming a judge. Judge Gates, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
You did something that I just think is just absolutely fascinating, and that was you conducted, I believe, a mock trial in the age of COVID-19. What was could you maybe just talk a little bit through your thoughts in doing that? And I'm not aware of anyone else that has done something quite like what you did probably now about a month ago.
So what we decided to do in the civil department in Maricopa is we realized, given the state of the pandemic, that our civil litigants and the lawyers were going to struggle to get back into court, and they were going to have trouble with access to justice because we were going to have a limitation on the number of jurors that we had, and it wasn't going to be safe for those folks to come back. So we quickly created a task force with innovative leaders of individuals in the law firms in the community who represent different entities at both sides. And we started talking about how can we be innovative, how can we be creative, and how can we ensure that balance between maintaining the tenets of justice and realizing the challenges of the pandemic. And so we created this 8 series. The first one is an in-person jury trial, which helped the parties recalibrate. So what does jury trial look like in the pandemic with everyone wearing a face covering or a face shield, jurors seated behind you because they can't be co-located? What is that experience like? And then the next series will be integrating technology, virtual jurors, jurors from home. And we're working with 2 PhDs to study whether we should integrate technology into the jury trial system, and if so, how.
So it's possible that this is one model of doing something in person in the age of COVID. There's also the possibility that we could have a jury trial that would be completely virtual.
Yes, so we're studying virtual jury selection, and then we're also studying whether we can do virtual trials. We're currently conducting exclusively virtual bench trials. So with the judge seated from home or at the courthouse, and the parties and the litigants and the witnesses all in their own separate space. And we're doing that every day.
Right now.
Right now. Absolutely. But what we're talking about is whether we can maintain that constitutional right to a jury, but those jurors are at home. And Arizona has also been selected as one of the 5 states. I'm working with a national committee to look at using technology in virtual jury trials. And we were selected as one of the 5 states to do a proof of concept, partnered with some trial lawyers and AT&T to look at whether we can help bridge that digital divide by getting devices and then distributing those devices to individuals who may not have reliable access to the internet or a device that they could use for jury service. And so we're trying to determine whether or not we can bridge that digital divide to ensure that we have a fair representative jury from our community.
That's interesting. I think you just answered my next question, because I was going to say, what if I get my jury summons and I'm told to appear online, but for whatever constraint, who knows, I can't do it? These are the kind of questions you're thinking about right now.
It is. So right now we use in Maricopa, we use a system that we refer to as eJuror. And that is an electronic registration process. Maybe you've used it before. If you've been summoned down for jury service, you go online and you register. Approximately 76% of our jurors use that pre-pandemic juror portal to register. So we've changed and modified that e-juror questionnaire to try and prevent jurors from needing to come down to the court unnecessarily. I refer to them as pinch points. Sometimes they're choke points. But we have jurors that park off-site and they bus to the court. So those buses have been completely, restructured. So the seats have been removed and there's been a new sanitation program put in place. But we still don't want jurors coming down that don't have to come down, and we would release anyway. And so we're using that online portal to have folks have a much more robust questionnaire process for judges to be able to release them before they come down. And we're using that portal to also determine whether or not individuals can serve as jurors from home. So the next series of our simulations will be using those individuals who have already been released from jury service, because we're not currently doing jury trials or impaneling new jury trials right now. But we're going to ask those folks if they'd be willing to volunteer as jurors from home and help us in our test simulation process to evaluate how to have jurors from home and whether we can maintain the integrity of the jury process.
Well, I watched the approximately minute 40 video that was put out, and it was really fascinating, and I have a few questions on that. The in-person environment, and this is where I'm going between Zoom or what we're doing and in person, is that with masks, you might not capture all the facial expressions. And in a jury trial, you could get some of the body language, but not all of it. And I don't know if that's how you would evaluate that data point.
And so that was one of the tests, that was one of the things that we were testing in that first in-person trial simulation. So what we did was we tested plexiglass enclosures. So one witness testified behind a plexiglass enclosure. One witness wore a face shield, and her counsel wore a face shield. And then the other side wore face masks. And so we had one witness behind plexiglass, one witness in a face shield, and one witness in a mask. And the jurors weren't advised that we were testing this process, but then after they had a written questionnaire, and then we had 2 follow-up sessions with them to evaluate sort of what they thought about face coverings, face shields, and plexiglass. Overwhelmingly, the jurors, as you might expect, preferred the plexiglass. But restructuring all of our 100+ courtrooms to have plexiglass is expensive and time consuming and difficult to do. And so then we started looking at, well, what are our other alternatives, and how can we ensure that that credibility is something that witnesses or that jurors are able to assess. And the other thing that we have to realize is everyone appreciates the magic of jury trials. The jurors go in that jury deliberation room and they spend days and days together, and something magic happens. And I don't know what it is, but Wednesday they all decide to wear Hawaiian shirts. They all bond and they all start to get to know each other, and they work really hard. But we can't do that anymore. Jurors can't be co-located in those small spaces. They have to be spread out in single chairs down the hall. We have to make sure we don't develop cliques, so we're rotating jurors all the time. So the new pandemic state of a jury trial, we just want to make sure that the litigants recognize and recalibrate in their mind what an in-person jury trial looks like. And that was a large focus of that in-person simulation, so that people could see what it was like, and we could also evaluate the challenges. Because we were restarting a homicide trial just a couple days after my simulation, and we were working through it with judges, simulating to try and anticipate, can we do this safely? How do we do this safely? How do we ensure due process? And then we used the real jurors to do our final test.
I assume the roles that were being played, the plaintiff's attorney and the defense attorney. They were willing participants in this. Were they real attorneys in your test?
And they're really good lawyers. No, they're outstanding lawyers in the community. One is a partner at Osborne, and one's a partner at Tiffany Bosco. And then actually one of my colleagues who was a judicial officer played the plaintiff. So she was a very effective witness. And then we had a woman from ASU who is a great advocate and a great actress. So she was wearing a mask. So I wanted to make sure that we had somebody very effective at communicating emotion, and she was crying, and to be able to get the jurors' feedback. And it was interesting to listen. So we videotaped their deliberations and the trial. And it was interesting to listen to their deliberations as one juror was questioning, I couldn't see her face. So the facial cues didn't mirror the voice that I was hearing. I was hearing her cry, but I couldn't see the facial behavior to be able to corroborate the sound I was hearing. And so it seemed less genuine to her. And so without a doubt, the jurors were impacted and affected by the presence of a cloth face covering on the witness.
I bet. You mentioned the feedback you got from your jurors. Even though they were participants in this experiment, what did the lawyers think?
So that was interesting. The other thing we also evaluated was, where are all of our participants and our jurors on their comfort level, right? Are these folks going out to restaurants? Are these folks, going to Target every day, all day long? What is the sort of comfort level of, societal reentry? And we had kind of different people were in different places. The two lawyers, one felt very uncomfortable in the trial, just from a safety perspective, and he said, I got over that. But the other lawyer felt very comfortable in it. As a judicial officer, I didn't have any concern for my own personal safety, but I felt a great sense of personal responsibility for the safety of everyone in the courtroom. I knew that we had taken every step possible, but people don't voluntarily oftentimes come to court. They're summoned to court. They have to come to court. And so, people who come to court we have a very vulnerable population that comes to court, and you don't always choose to be there. And so I think we have to be respectful of ensuring the safety of those individuals who aren't electing to come to our establishment, to come to our facility.
Are there in-person jury trials going on right now?
So we restarted one trial. It was a trial that was 2 weeks into the trial before the pandemic and before we discontinued our in-person jury trials. And so those jurors have been on hold. We restarted that trial, and then due to circumstances that I won't discuss here, but it went on hold again. And we anticipate it restarting next week for its completion. But we are currently not impaneling new juries for felony trials. We did impanel 2 grand juries, but we're not currently impaneling any new juries through the end of July. Interesting.
This is fascinating. Glenn, this was a great idea to do this. Judge, I know you've heard the maxim, justice delayed, justice denied. I mean, do you feel the pressure? Like, we got to get a move on and get these jury trials moving again?
So I feel that we need to continue to give access to justice that is safe. And that's, so I don't know what that picture is. And that's why we spend an unbelievable amount of time trying to analyze that. And we are out there, I know personally, and a lot of my colleagues, we are coast to coast knocking on doors of other courts, finding out, what are you doing, what is working, what's not working. And we're doing it internationally as well with other courts that have, are maybe a couple of steps ahead of us. And the other thing is, other courts have experienced, we fortunately don't have a lot of challenges with our weather, but other folks have had long periods of shutdown as a result of hurricanes or other challenges. And so some of those courts have a little bit of a jump start on us on trying to figure out what to do when you're unable to physically come to court. No one has had the experience for the duration, the long period that we have. But the short answer, the long, I guess, answer to your question of, does that make me anxious? Unequivocally. Many courts have indefinitely suspended civil trials. And I understand the prioritization of trials, and it's from the chief's order, the chief justice, which is, a civil trial is prioritized beneath an out of custody misdemeanor case, which I understand because a criminal defendant has a constitutional right to a speedy trial. But when you look at civil practitioners, civil litigants, civil parties need to have access to justice as well. And so we also appreciate that no civil trial is the same. And so we're using a proceeding that we refer to as the fair limits proceeding, where a judicial officer is sitting down with the parties and really working through what is the picture of justice for your case. Is the case dependent upon, is the shirt red? Maybe that has to be the in-person jury trial. Conversely, can we look at a different model? Is it the fact finders need to evaluate the credibility of a witness or to determine damages? Perhaps we can borrow from Texas and use this model of a summary jury trial where we use virtual jurors from home. We put on a trial in an abbreviated form where you're only evaluating damages or the credibility issue that's kind of at in the crosshairs of trying to figure out resolution. And then you get that jury to deliberate, return a verdict, and then the next day you have a judicial settlement conference with a judge to try and use that data that you gathered from that virtual jury to see if you can reach resolution. Can you, get through those challenges that were preventing you from resolving the case? So we're really looking at taking each individual case and the judges trying to say, we're here to serve. That's our job. We took an oath, and we may not be able to give you the package that you had pre-pandemic, but we can still give you access to justice.
That's really interesting. I would imagine that any judge takes pride in his or her ability to control their courtroom. Do you worry about that loss of control when certain players aren't there in the room? And I'd also love to get your thoughts about how important it is for you to be there on the bench, gavel in hand, wearing the robe.
So, that's interesting, kind of two parts. So the one about the control, the judges, we do debriefs and kind of talk about lessons learned as frequently as we can. The mute all feature is a feature that I wish existed in real life. and I have to tell you, it is a mechanism that I love.
Good.
I'm not a person, my kids kind of always joke that I've never used my gavel. And when their friends say, I can't believe you don't use your gavel, my kids are like, have you heard her mom voice? She uses her mom voice. So it is different. And, I don't tend to do hearings from home, but a lot of our judges do. Mm-hmm. So they would be in this environment right here. The platform we use is different than Zoom, so it doesn't give me the option of a virtual background. So I have what I have. Mm-hmm. And so I believe that it's important because it's a little less formal. I tend to go into the courthouse to have that backdrop, to wear my robe, to have that experience. Mm-hmm. But a lot of judges are doing their hearings and trials from their house. Just they put their robe on and yeah.
Wow. This is really just a lot. I'm very glad you're thinking through this because there's just a gazillion issues. I even think of the backdrop that I have here. I have a bunch of books. I don't even know all the books. If I have a bunch of political books, or a bunch of books that could even impact the way someone connected thinks about, me as a judge, that could be an issue. So, I mean, all of these types of things, my God, it's Judge, it's a lot.
It is. I vacillate between being inspired at how quickly we are evolving and being, terrified that we are destroying the system of justice that we have come to rely upon. So, but I feel like we don't have a lot of data, and that's part of the reason we're doing the simulations that we are, is to ensure that we can gather information. And right now in Maricopa, we're not obligating or forcing, requiring, ordering anyone into a particular model. Like, we're not saying you have to do a virtual jury selection or you have to do this particular route toward trial or not. We're trying to meet with them and have us learn from them about their case, and then give them options and try and work on a package that looks right for their case, so that we don't indefinitely suspend civil trials, because I just don't believe that that's a route that I'm willing to take as a former civil practitioner who appreciates the absolute critical need for our civil litigants to have access to justice.
It's really, though, encouraging that you're consulting with colleagues across the country, so we could all learn from each other and take best practices, so we could have the most normal possible judicial system through this very difficult time.
It is, and we all, it's a shocking amount of collaboration. I will tell you, I am on the phone every day with a judge in some other state or some other country talking about what's working, what's not. Maricopa tends to have the reputation of being more innovative and more, we lean forward a little more. Mm-hmm. And so I think we're probably a few steps ahead of a lot of jurisdictions. And so a lot of folks are coming to us. Florida has used our model. California was looking at using it. So a lot of states are trying to learn from what we're doing, and we're trying to learn from them.
It's fascinating stuff. I've got to ask you though, Glenn mentioned, testing things like wearing a mask versus plexiglass, stuff like that. You've got to know as a judge, there's certain attorneys that have a reputation for putting on a bit of a performance. Do some of these judges and some of these attorneys, are they worried that they lose a little bit of their energy when they're in a virtual setting?
Absolutely. And that's why I felt it was really important to involve the practitioners, and it was really, I thought it was really interesting. My vision at first was that the whole thing would be virtual. Lawyers virtual, jurors virtual, everyone virtual. And the lawyers immediately had pushback, and they said, look, my picture of a trial is something I know. Like, I do it all the time. A juror's picture of a trial is what they see on TV. So it's not a big leap for them to watch a trial. It's a big leap for me as a practitioner to do a trial using Zoom. Now, I think a lot of them are moving forward in that because they're doing trials using Zoom now. But I think what's happening is the folks that are seeing what it's like to have an in-person trial, it's so hard to replicate that sort of drama when you either look like a welder or Darth Vader, or, you have this. And the other thing that's really difficult is your jurors are, it's like doing a trial in the round, because your jurors are all over the place and you can't be seated with your client. Right. So it's challenging. And I think one of the, yes, you hear a lot of practitioners that will say, I need that. I need that moment with the jurors, and I think that's why we were trying to explain the recalibration of, I'm not sure that that's what the picture looks like right now.
I love it.
I just am grateful for your work. This is really tough stuff. Judge, and I know your commitment to the integrity of our judicial system, and just thank you for being with us this evening to talk about what you're doing, and we applaud your efforts. and look forward to, I'm confident that as this moves forward, you and Maricopa County will set a standard that we could all be proud of, and we'll see a lot of other jurisdictions emulate it.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate the support of our community to be able to evaluate how to continue to provide justice for the folks that need it.
Well,
Thank you.
Thanks again. Thanks again, Judge. That's another edition in the books. We will see you next time.